Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and today I would like to discuss the influence of Ed Gein. For those of you who don't know, Ed Gein was a guy who lived in Wisconsin in the US in the 60s, and he killed a couple of people and dug graves up and was pretty much affected by the death of his mother. They both lived on a farm, and when his mother died he didn't really cope with it very well, and he dug bodies up to keep him company. He wore dead skin, and then he actually killed a couple of women as well. He took that next step to have some company before he was finally arrested. He was deemed not to be mentally fit to actually kind of stand trial, so he lived in a mental asylum until 1984 when he died. But he has some link to cinema. There has been a couple of biopics, one called simply Ed Gein in the year 2000, but more famously he influenced Robert Bloch, who wrote the book and screenplay for Hitchcock's Psycho, and he did have some influence on Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, but I'm not going to talk about those two films because I don't think they're actually that good. The two films I'm going to talk about one particularly, but the two films that had a big Ed Gein influence were both made in 1974. The first one is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is obviously the more famous one by Tobe Hooper, and the second one is Deranged, which, at least for me, isn't that well known. I actually only saw it for the first time a couple of nights ago. I got this in an Arrow sale and I was just blown away with it, or by it. Like I said, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of the more famous one. They obviously were influenced by Ed Gein, but they kind of took it further as far as adding Leatherface and making it a family. So I'm not really going to talk about Texas Chainsaw. I think we all know what it is. I think it's one of the most influential, important and best horror films. But it's just interesting that this was made in 1974, as was Deranged. Now, Deranged is a fantastic film. It is more accurate as far as Ed Gein's story. You know, they change his name to Ezra Cobb in this, because Ed Gein was still alive at the time, even though he was in a mental institute. I mean, they change a couple of details. I won't tell you what they are, not to spoil it, but on the whole, it's a fairly accurate portrayal of what actually happened. You have to start the film really by the performance by Robert Blossom. If you don't know who he is, if you Google his name, you'll recognise him for playing, strangely enough, a lot of old guy characters in westerns and other films. Obviously, in 1974, he's still maybe in his 50s, but you'll certainly recognise him, and he just gives an amazing performance. because he gives such a great performance. Not that you're on his side or anything, but you can kind of understand him. The film kind of starts with the death of his mother, who by all accounts was a domineering woman. Very big on the Bible and constantly browbeats Ezra, with the wages of sin and how women are whores and not to be trusted, and generally nasty rhetoric about hell and all of that. You get the impression that Ezra isn't that well educated, and certainly isn't that great with other people socially. He's just got such a kind of tight bond with his mother. So his mother dies, and in this version he digs her up and brings her back, and he talks to her, and but again, the performance that he gives, he doesn't give a wildly over the top performance. It's just a kind of subtle, quiet performance of a not sane person. But again, he's never really a monster particularly. He is still human, so they don't make him into a cartoon character. There is still humanity in him, but it's obviously somewhat twisted. The look of the film is kind of documentary. There is actually a narrator who appears in the middle of scenes. Obviously the characters can't see him, but somehow that actually works. And there is some kind of black humour in it. The woman that his mother told him that he could trust, the one woman that he could trust, was because she's fat. So he goes to visit her, and he tells her that his mother still talks to him, and she said her husband still talks to her. And then later on, Ezra's talking to his mother's corpse and saying that he doesn't think that the woman's right in the head, which is quite funny coming from a man who's talking to the corpse of his mother. The acting, apart from Robert's Blossom, is still very good. I mean, there's no names in it. It is a very low budget film. I don't know, it'd be interesting to find out what was the lower budget, the Chainsaw Massacre or Deranged, seeing they were both made in 1974. So there's no, some older horror films or whatever, there is a definite lapse in acting quality. But in Deranged, everybody is really good in it, and it's such a great wee film. I think even when he's doing terrible things, there's a reason for him doing the terrible things, and you understand his reasoning for doing it. So he's not portrayed as, I don't think Ed Gein in reality, you could really call him a serial killer particularly. Yes, he killed people, but he wasn't doing it in a kind of a compulsion to do it. He wasn't doing it for notoriety, or you don't ever get the sense he was doing it because he was addicted to doing it. He's really just doing it because it's the next kind of stage and he wants company. There is a dinner table scene where he brings one of his live victims, and there's a dinner table with corpses sitting around it, very similar to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But again, he doesn't see anything wrong with that. There's nice details about, there's a hollowed out skull, and that's where the bread rolls are sitting in, which is a nice little touch, because again, in reality, when they went into Ed Gein's house, they found waste bins made out of skin, lampshades made out of skin, pretty sick stuff. In this film, there's even a drum made out of skin, which, when he's trying to impress one of his guests with his musical talent, and obviously he wore skin. He kind of dressed up as a woman as well in skin. Yeah, so not a healthy person, and not a healthy film either. But I was just blown away by how good it was. Obviously, sometimes with kind of older horror films or whatever, you do kind of wonder what you're going to watch as far as quality. But I just thought the central performance was absolutely fantastic. It's obviously difficult when you're playing somebody who was insane. It's very easy to go over the top with it. The extras on this, there's actually a commentary with Tom Savini, the famous makeup artist. This was actually his second job. And he gives a really interesting commentary as always. He always strikes you as such a nice bloke. There's also an interview with the guy from Human Centipede 2 and 3, talking about Ed Gein and how to portray a psychopath on celluloid. Giving reasons for his actions instead of just like chewing the scenery wildly. There's also an interview with Scott Spiegel about how he obviously loved the film, and he actually worked with Roberts Blossom later in his career. Again, with Arrow, it's a really nice set, it's a really nice print as well. And it was really just to showcase this film, because again, I really loved it. And also the influence of Ed Gein, sadly. I will be doing a top 10 serial killer films, but I'm not sure Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Deranged will be in it, because I'm not really sure Ed Gein is a serial killer per se, for the reasons I said earlier. But please let me know in the comments below if you think it should be included in a serial killer list. But I just wanted to have a wee chat. Hopefully you found it interesting about the influence of Ed Gein on cinema, because that's at least 4 films. Because as an audience, we are, I wouldn't say obsessed, but certainly interested with serial killers and people who do unspeakable acts. But I find the best films are the ones that actually try and have a point to actually understand the people, rather than just making them one-dimensional monsters. And Deranged certainly does an excellent job of that. So please let me know in the comments below whether you've seen Deranged, what you thought of it, or which film is the best Ed Gein inspired film, and leave a like or subscribe if you want to see any more videos. So thank you very much. This is Solitude from Solitude Films, saying have a good day.